History is often taught as a list of dates, names, wars, and victories. But history was never meant to be memorized. It was meant to be understood. Because hidden inside every empire's rise and every civilization's fall, there is a lesson, a warning humanity has heard again and again, and ignored every single time. This video is not about one king, not about one war, not about one country. It is about the greatest lesson in human history, a lesson so obvious that we refuse to see it, and so uncomfortable that we choose to forget it. To understand this lesson, we must go back to the very beginning of civilization, the first pattern. More than 5,000 years ago, humans stopped living as small tribes. They settled near rivers. They built cities. They created laws, armies, and religions. For the first time, power became concentrated. And that was the moment history began repeating itself. Every civilization followed the same pattern. First, hope. Then, growth. Then, confidence. Then, arrogance. And finally, collapse. The names changed, the languages changed, the flags changed, but the pattern never did. The illusion of permanence. Every great civilization believed one dangerous lie. We are different. We will last forever. The Sumerians believed it. The Egyptians believed it. The Greeks believed it. The Romans believed it. The Mongols believed it. The British believed it. And each one of them disappeared or declined, not because they were weak, but because they believed they were invincible. Power creates comfort. Comfort creates complacency. Complacency creates blindness, and blindness destroys empires. Rome, the perfect example. Rome did not fall because of one battle. It did not fall because of one enemy. Rome fell because it forgot its own lesson. In the beginning, Romans valued discipline, duty, and sacrifice. Leaders lived simply. Soldiers served for honor, not wealth. The law applied to everyone. But as Rome expanded, something changed. Power became personal. Wealth replaced virtue. Politics replaced principle. The Roman elite stopped serving the people and started using them. Sound familiar? The quiet beginning of collapse. History teaches us something terrifying. Civilizations do not collapse loudly. They collapse slowly. First, leaders stop listening. Then, corruption becomes normal. Then, truth becomes inconvenient. Then, division becomes useful. By the time people realize what is happening, it is already too late. Rome still looked powerful, even as it was rotting from inside. And this is the lesson humanity keeps ignoring. The greatest threats to civilizations are never external. They come from within. The human nature problem. Why do we repeat the same mistakes? Because history is not really about nations. It is about human nature. Humans crave power. Humans fear losing control. Humans prefer comfort over truth. And when a society rewards greed, silence, and obedience, collapse becomes inevitable. This is not pessimism. This is historical fact. Every empire thought it was the exception. The British Empire once ruled nearly a quarter of the world. It controlled the seas. It controlled trade. It controlled nations. People truly believed the sun would never set on the British Empire. Today, it exists mostly in history books. The lesson was there, clear, loud, but it was ignored, just like always. The warning history keeps sending. History does not punish civilizations immediately. It gives warnings. Economic inequality, political corruption, loss of shared values, division among people, leaders disconnected from reality. These signs appear before every major collapse, and every generation looks at these signs and says, "This time is different." It never is. Why this lesson is uncomfortable? Because accepting this lesson forces us to ask a dangerous question. What if we are not as different as we think? What if modern technology, modern borders, and modern weapons do not make us immune to ancient mistakes? What if progress doesn't cancel human flaws? This is why history is often reduced to dates and names, so we don't have to face its meaning. So here's the first half of the greatest lesson in human history. No civilization collapses because it is attacked. It collapses because it forgot why it succeeded. In the next part, we will explore how societies lose their moral core, how truth becomes dangerous, and how ordinary people unknowingly participate in collapse. Because the most terrifying part of history is this: collapse does not require evil people, only silent ones. Every civilization reaches a moment when the greatest threat is no longer hunger, war, or invasion, but truth itself. History shows us this again and again. When a society is healthy, truth is welcomed, it is debated, it is respected. But when a society begins to decay, truth becomes uncomfortable, and uncomfortable truths are the first things to be silenced. The turning point no one notices. The collapse of civilizations does not begin with violence. It begins with denial. Leaders stop asking difficult questions. Institutions stop correcting themselves. People stop speaking honestly. Not because they are evil, but because honesty becomes risky. At this point in history's pattern, truth is no longer seen as a tool for progress, but as a threat to stability. And that is when decline accelerates. Athens, the birthplace of a warning. Ancient Athens is often remembered as the cradle of democracy, philosophy, and free thought. But Athens also provides one of history's most painful lessons. Socrates, one of the greatest thinkers who ever lived, was executed by the very democracy he helped shape. Why? Not because he lied, but because he told the truth. He questioned authority. He challenged popular beliefs. He exposed hypocrisy. And the people decided that silence was more comfortable than wisdom. Athens did not immediately fall after Socrates' death, but something essential was lost that day: the courage to question. When comfort replaces integrity. History teaches us something subtle but brutal. Civilizations do not die when people are oppressed. They die when people become comfortable with oppression. At first, censorship is justified as protection. Control is justified as safety. Silence is justified as unity. People are told, this is temporary, this is for the greater good, this keeps us stable. And slowly, freedom becomes a memory, not a right. Rome's fear of the messenger. As Rome weakened, its leaders became obsessed with control. Messengers who delivered bad news were punished. Generals who spoke honestly were ignored. Writers who criticized power were silenced. Reality did not change, only the stories told about it did. Rome did not fall because it lacked information. It fell because it rejected it. When leaders stop listening to truth, truth does not disappear, it becomes disaster. The lie of unity. One of history's most dangerous illusions is the belief that unity requires silence. True unity is built on shared values. False unity is built on fear. History shows us that societies often choose false unity because it feels safer. Disagreement becomes betrayal, questions become threats, differences become enemies. But a society that cannot tolerate disagreement cannot adapt, and what cannot adapt cannot survive. Ordinary people, extraordinary consequences. Here is the most uncomfortable part of this lesson. Civilizations do not collapse because of villains alone. They collapse because of ordinary people who choose silence. People who say, "It's not my problem. I don't want trouble. Someone else will fix it." History remembers tyrants by name, but it is shaped by millions of quiet decisions. Silence is not neutral. It is participation. The slow death of responsibility. In healthy societies, citizens feel responsible for the future. In declining societies, responsibility is outsourced. People expect leaders to solve everything. They expect institutions to protect values. They expect systems to correct themselves. But systems are built by people, and when people stop caring, systems rot. Rome's citizens stopped defending the Republic long before it officially ended. By the time the empire fell, most people simply adapted because collapse had already become normal. Truth versus stability. History reveals a cruel paradox. Short-term stability often requires lies. Long-term survival requires truth. Civilizations that choose comfort over honesty may survive a few decades longer, but at the cost of their future. The truth always demands a price, but lies charge interest, and eventually the debt is collected. Why this keeps happening? Why do humans repeat this pattern? Because facing truth requires courage, and courage is exhausting. It is easier to believe comforting stories than painful realities. It is easier to blame outsiders than confront internal decay. It is easier to preserve appearances than fix foundations. And history is ruthless with societies that choose ease over integrity. The second part of the lesson. So here is the second part of the greatest lesson in human history. A civilization begins to die the moment truth becomes dangerous and silence is rewarded. In the next part, we will explore how power disconnects leaders from reality, how elites lose touch with ordinary people, and how inequality becomes the engine of collapse. Because history is clear about one thing. When those at the top stop understanding those at the bottom, the fall is already underway. Every civilization that ever collapsed shared one fatal mistake. Those in power stopped understanding the people they ruled. At first, the distance was small. Then it became cultural. Then it became economic. And finally, it became emotional. By the time leaders realized what was happening, they were no longer leading a society. They were ruling over strangers. The invisible wall. Power creates an invisible wall. On one side are ordinary people, their struggles, fears, and daily realities. On the other side are elites, protected by wealth, status, and institutions. The wall is not built overnight. It grows slowly, silently, and almost politely. Leaders stop hearing real voices. Advisors filter uncomfortable truths. Statistics replace human experience. And reality becomes something leaders read about, not something they live. Rome's elite blindness. In the later Roman Empire, senators lived in unimaginable luxury. They hosted grand banquets while citizens struggled to afford bread. They debated philosophy while soldiers went unpaid. They argued about tradition while the foundations of society cracked. The elites believed their wealth proved their superiority. History proved otherwise. Inequality is not just about money. History teaches us something important. Inequality is not dangerous because some people are rich. It becomes fatal when the rich stop needing the poor. When elites no longer rely on shared systems, public services, common laws, collective identity, they detach. Private security replaces public safety. Private education replaces public learning. Private influence replaces public trust. At that moment, society stops being a community and becomes a hierarchy. The French Revolution warning. Before the French Revolution, the nobility lived in palaces. They paid little to no taxes. They enjoyed privileges beyond imagination. Meanwhile, the common people starved. The warning signs were everywhere: hunger, anger, resentment. But the elites dismissed them as noise. When the revolution came, it did not knock politely. History shows us this brutal truth. When peaceful correction becomes impossible, violent correction becomes inevitable. Power and the illusion of control. Leaders often believe power equals control, but history proves the opposite. The more disconnected power becomes, the less control it truly has. Decisions are made based on ideology, not reality. Policies are designed for appearances, not outcomes. And when consequences arrive, leaders are shocked, but the people are not. The collapse of shared identity. Strong civilizations share a common identity, not race, not religion, but purpose. When inequality grows, that shared purpose fractures. People stop saying we and start saying they. They don't care about us. They live in a different world. They will never understand. Once a society reaches this stage, trust collapses. And without trust, no system can survive. The psychology of elites. History is clear about one thing. Elites rarely believe they are the problem. They see themselves as more educated, more capable, more deserving. Criticism is dismissed as ignorance. Anger is dismissed as jealousy. Suffering is dismissed as failure. This mindset is not unique to any era. It is a recurring human flaw, and it blinds those in power until it is too late, when laws stop protecting everyone. In healthy societies, laws apply equally. In declining societies, laws protect power. Justice becomes selective. Accountability becomes symbolic. Punishment becomes optional. People notice this immediately. And once people lose faith in fairness, they stop respecting rules. Why follow a system that does not protect you? This is not rebellion. It is resignation. Bread and circuses. As dissatisfaction grows, leaders often choose distraction over reform. The Romans called it bread and circuses. Entertainment to pacify the masses, small rewards to quiet anger, spectacle to replace substance. History shows this strategy always fails. You can distract people from hunger. You cannot distract them from humiliation. The third part of the lesson. So, here is the third part of the greatest lesson in human history. A civilization collapses when power becomes disconnected, inequality becomes normalized, and shared identity is lost. In the next part, we will explore how internal division is intentionally created, how people are turned against each other, and how collapse becomes profitable for a few. Because history reveals something disturbing. Sometimes societies are not destroyed by accident. They are dismantled. Every collapsing civilization reaches a final stage. Not chaos, not war, but normalization. The abnormal becomes routine. The unacceptable becomes tolerated. The dangerous becomes familiar. And that is how the end begins. Not with panic, but with acceptance. Division as a tool. History reveals something deeply unsettling. Internal division is rarely an accident. When societies become unequal, when leaders lose legitimacy, division becomes useful. People are encouraged to blame each other, not the system. Different groups are given different enemies. Different truths are told to different people. Fear replaces understanding. Us versus them becomes the dominant story. And while people fight each other, the real problems grow untouched. Rome did not collapse all at once. The Roman Empire did not suddenly disappear. Most people woke up one day and lived almost the same lives as before. Taxes were higher, security was weaker, trust was gone. But life continued. That is the most terrifying truth of history. Collapse feels ordinary while it is happening. People adapt to decline the same way they adapt to weather. Slowly, quietly, without resistance. The final illusion. At the final stage, societies cling to one last illusion. Someone will fix this. Someone stronger. Someone smarter. Someone decisive. But history is merciless here. No leader can save a society that has abandoned responsibility. No system can survive without shared values. No empire can last when truth, fairness, and trust are gone. The moment that matters most. History shows us that collapse is not inevitable. There's always a moment, a narrow window where correction is possible. But correction requires sacrifice. It requires honest leadership, active citizens, accountability, moral courage. And these are exactly the things declining societies avoid, because repair is painful and denial is comfortable. Why humanity keeps failing this test. This is the uncomfortable conclusion. Humanity does not fail because it lacks intelligence. It fails because it lacks discipline. We know the pattern. We have recorded it for thousands of years. We teach it in books and documentaries. And still, we repeat it. Because knowledge without action is just entertainment. History is not ignored because it is unclear, but because it demands responsibility. The greatest lesson in human history. So, here it is, the complete lesson, not broken into parts, not romanticized. Civilizations do not collapse from the outside. They collapse when people abandon truth, tolerate injustice, accept division, and choose comfort over responsibility. Empires fall when citizens stop caring. Freedom dies when silence becomes safer than honesty. Collapse arrives when everyone waits for someone else to act. This lesson is not about the past. History is not a mirror for ancient people. It is a warning for present ones. The names have changed. The technology has changed. The speed has changed. But human nature has not. The same choices produce the same outcomes. Every time. The question history leaves us with. History never tells us what will happen. It tells us what can happen if patterns are repeated. And it leaves us with one question, a question every generation must answer for itself. Will we finally learn, or will we become another chapter future historians study and say, they knew and did nothing? The final truth. History does not end civilizations. People do. And history does not repeat itself because it wants to, but because we allow it to.